remote infection, the biology makes the T cells potentially a better target than antibodies, which tend to wane a bit sooner. At least that's what we're seeing in the setting of novel coronavirus, COVID-19.
Right, and Diana, I know, as we've been saying, the antibodies really hog so much of the attention, mostly because it's easy to test them and it's also quick. But the levels of antibodies, firsthand, they do wane after you've recovered from an active illness. So talk to me about your experience with that.
So I was actually one of the first people to get my antibodies tested back at the end of March. So I know that I had a high antibody count, and it remained high through the summer, and I did all of my plasma donations. So remember, it's still
Dr.
National Blood
Fauci,
Month, so
Bob
if you're out
book
there,
really lady.
if you've had COVID, please donate your plasma, and if you haven't, donate your blood, platelets, whatever you got. And I had detectable antibodies until October. And at that point, I showed up negative on a commercial test. I was able to get it tested by a university lab, and it showed my titers 160, which is pretty low. So the interesting thing is, so mine lasted for about, 8 months. My antibodies lasted. Other people come out of COVID with no antibodies. Some people have them for much longer. We have some people in our group who had a mild case back in March and they're still super donors. That is rare, but everybody's body seems to react so differently that any more information that we can get to understand our own situation and understand more about how the immune system works in general and in particular when it comes to COVID.
And Dr. Baldo, why do you think that this T-cell test is going to be helpful as we learn more about what this virus does to our bodies?
I'll give you a couple of reasons why. One reason why is that we just simply don't know for how long someone will be protected after having, for instance, community-acquired infection with COVID-19. And the second is, and I know you also opened by talking about vaccines, we're very lucky that these vaccines look to be very effective and safe, but we still have very little idea about how long they last. And so until we know that definitively, and that's going to take a long time, we have to look for what we call surrogates or biomarkers. Like, what are some things that we could measure that would give us some indication that you still have parts of your immune memory around that could help you in the future to fight off future infection. And as was already mentioned, part of that can be antibodies produced by B cells, but we also believe that a big part of that is going to be the T cells as well. And everyone that orders or gets our test has the ability to opt into research. So if they order the test at t-detect.com, they can opt into research where we can then ask them questions about their experience. Have they experienced COVID-19 since the time of getting that test? And we'll start to build out a database, what's called a real-world database, to be able to correlate T-cell signal and potential protection from future infection as well, Elizabeth.
And Diana, I know that, in your group, you have some patients who had acute symptoms or were asymptomatic, and then you have, this group of people, the long haulers, who some of them have been severely ill for such a long period of time and never really fully recovered.
Right, and a lot of them have not been able to get into post-COVID care centers because they never were able to get a PCR test back in the spring when they were largely unavailable and often faulty. And so this is really going to be another clue for people. So a positive test will be a clear indication that you had COVID in the past. Obviously, a negative test is not dispositive. So, if you got a negative test, it's not going to say you definitively did not have COVID because you might not have a durable T-cell reaction, just like you might not have had a durable antibody reaction. But the chances are higher. So it's more likely that you are going to get an accurate answer on whether or not you did have COVID back in the spring. And so if you're suffering of, these strange symptoms,
you had a spring fever, maybe.
Been beating too fast recently, and you had some odd virus last winter that might or might not have been COVID. This is the way to find out because COVID can, as we all know, can do serious damage to the body, and you don't want to leave that left to its own. You really need to take care of any issues that come up medically speaking. So having that piece of knowledge is just another clue of what is going on with you personally. And I got to actually participate in the trial, in the creation of this, in the trial. And contributing to science, no matter how you're doing it, is such a gratifying piece of this. There are very few highlights of COVID, as I think it's safe to say, but being able to contribute to science is one of them. And I find it fascinating. I'm a real data hound, though, so, I wear a Fitbit. I love getting all of that information.
Dr. Baldo, I'm wondering if you take a look at some of the T cells, are you seeing a difference in the people who are severely ill with COVID and the people who are either asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms in their T cell response?
It's interesting when we look retroactively or retrospectively at exactly that, T cell signals in people that did really well versus those that did very poorly, we actually do see differences. But the trouble is we're doing that retroactively or retrospectively. The question is, can we predict based on T cells who's likely to have a better or worse outcome? And we're doing that work right now to try to find what we call correlates of severity or correlates of outcomes as well. But there are definitely differences in what we call the T cell repertoire or the T cell signal between people who get very sick or unfortunately die and those who are able to clear the disease. But as Diana had pointed out, the heterogeneity, so in other words, the differences between individuals of this disease is absolutely tremendous. And so someone who potentially had a pretty mild case could actually have a very strong either antibody or T cell signal and vice versa. But in the aggregate, we're starting to see some trends in terms of correlations between severity and T cells.
And I think that really kind of begs the question of what kind of population immunity do we really have?
Yeah, and I have a strong belief on this, and we don't know the answer yet, and it's going to take some time to tell, but some combination of the B cells that produce antibodies and the memory B cells that kind of sit around and waiting for the next time you might get exposed, and or the T cells are going to ultimately hold that clue.
All right, we see all of your questions coming in. We're going to get to as many as possible as we continue this conversation about our bodies and their response with these T cells. So do remember, we want to hear from you. If you've got a question or comment, head to Facebook right now.
So, do everything you can to be a little healthier. You can drink green tea. Green tea is very good for you. Turmeric tea. Turmeric is very good for you. So turmeric tea, green tea, chamomile tea, basically tea, black tea. And you get the organic honey and you put that in there. Because I don't know if milk is good for you. Because milk is really it's got hormones in it and stuff. So just try to, keep yourself as healthy as possible. I know healthy people can get this disease too. I mean, it's affecting a lot of people with the weakened immune systems. My immune system is, it's not great, but I still didn't catch it, so I have faith in God, so I always pray about everything. I pray, I don't stop, so, because I know, I know what to do. He's there. It's not like, he's not going to forsake you if you, I don't know how to explain it. Just keep your faith. Because if I got way past it, then you can too.